Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this rainy day and for our second webinar. We're going to be talking about the opportunities for partnership between the private sector and charities and how to get the best out of them. My name is Kevin Keane. I'm proud to be the chairman of the AJC and in its 50th year. I will be moderating, trying to get us through this in the 40 minutes that we've got allocated. We've got another great panel for this webinar. Lisa Springate is chair of the IOD in Jersey and legal and technical director at Jersey Finance in her day job. Well, welcome, Lisa. We have Tom Dingle, the director at Art House Jersey. Thank you for joining us, Tom. We have Mark Cox. He's not stacking shelves today. He is the CEO of Co-op and he's sparing some of his valuable time to give the private sector view of this subject. And then finally, we have Alan Wood, who's chair of the Grace Crocker Foundation and in his day job works for Jersey Finance in bringing new business to our island and obviously often new donors. So as I say, thank you very much to everybody who's participating in this webinar. It's going to be recorded, so will be available for others to see. But I couldn't think of anything better to be doing today, especially given the weather outside. So let's start with Tom. Tom, can you talk about the benefits to a charity of a partnership with a private sector organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the thing that comes to mind, I think, probably from the charitable sector first and foremost, and would be on everybody's mind straight away, would be money. Because, of course, from the charitable sector's point of view, one of the big things that you're trying to do is raise money, but perhaps some of it comes from government, but also from donors. And where you can have an injection of capital and from funds from a private partnership, that can be hugely beneficial for what you're trying to do. And I think it's something that we shouldn't shy away from. Money is an incredibly important resource. It's what makes the world go round. And when a corporate, sometimes I think there can be a shying away from that being the main thing that contributes, but actually when that is being put towards a really important charitable purpose, it is absolutely fundamental. Away from that, though, I think that we have found that the human resource, from both a resource point of view in terms of extra hands, people being able to offer volunteers, but also very importantly from a knowledge base. Often you have people from a different sector who are able to look at what you're trying to achieve and offer a different perspective. I think because good partnerships come around shared purpose, it's able to offer clarity of vision. You're often able then to shape a message and connect to the public better. And often a lot of businesses are people orientated, they're audience focused. And I think from a charitable point of view, sometimes you can be so passionate about what you do, you can forget about how you need to relate that message or what you're trying to achieve to an audience. And so I think from a marketing point of view, there's also access to audiences and thinking about how you're talking about a project and making sure that it stays true to its core purpose can be hugely important. And then finally, often with different organisations, you have access to their clients, which can give you access to further expertise, but also further forms of income. So for a charity like ours, we have 5 different main sources of income, from government through to earned income, trusts and foundations, sponsorship, and then from private giving. And actually that can be incredibly important as well. So, I mean, a myriad of benefits. And from our point of view, I think we don't deliver anything in isolation. Everything's through partnership. And it is that combination of different factors.
Thanks, Tom. Alan, from the Grace Crocker Foundation, what can you add to that?
Yeah, so, well, I think from a partnership perspective, we've had a number of partnerships over the years. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Jersey Finance partnership, but there's some other partnerships, even over the COVID period, that has been really important. As Standard Bank, we're looking to deploy money into the community to look after people that had maybe lost their roles and various other things. And we changed a part of our tact with that partnership to make sure that we could get money to families that might have been on 0 contract hours and lost their roles. And so I think there's a whole myriad of opportunity through the partnership lens. One that we are very proud of is our partnership with the Family First Foundation, where we set up a role for somebody to direct families to charities within Jersey. And that has been very successful. We've been funding that for 3 years, and now that's standing on its own 2 feet. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity through different partnerships.
Thanks, Alan. I think clearly lots of people most people who work in business these days are a connection with a charity or a beneficiary of a charity or just support a charity. So maybe I could come to the 2 business representatives for their perspective on this point. Lisa?
Thanks, Kevin. Certainly what we've seen from an IOD membership perspective over the course of the last few months is obviously it's been exceptional and challenging times for individuals, businesses, but also in particular charities as well. But I think one of the positives to emerge from the last few months is this community spirit, which we've really seen across the globe, but also here in Jersey in terms of this community spirit and supporting locally and trying to assist others. I think in terms of, listening to Tom in terms of from the charity side, it also gives great benefits to the private sector side as well, Kevin, because the concept of work, as we all knew, it has sort of evolved over the years. It's now the expectations have changed in terms of what employees want. And I think in addition to the workplace being a place to build wealth and develop networks and satisfy intellectual curiosity, it's also very much a case of contributing to wider society. And so it's not surprising that an increasing proportion of companies, and we're seeing it within the IOD membership, are looking to methods well beyond cold hard cash to satisfy their workforce. And obviously one such way of doing this is this commitment to worthy causes and social good. And I think what I think we can all see is that those employers and companies that concentrate on these areas really can differentiate themselves from the competitors and attract a generation of workers who, whilst dedicated to success, are also in possession of a strong social conscience and moral compass as their focus. I was actually in preparation today, Kevin, looking at the National Council for Voluntary Organisations, some stats. And it's a UK-based organisation that represents the interests of about 12,000 voluntary groups. And 3 years ago, the data is such that the private sector organisations, where there's this partnership between the charity and the private sector, contributed more than 1.9 billion to the total voluntary sector income of 45 billion. So it's a really substantial contribution. And in fact, it's more than 4 times as much as the National Lottery Fund. So I think it's a good indicator of the importance that profit-focused organisations are placing on the third sector. And I think certainly from an IOD perspective, we have the Director of the Year Awards, which we're running and which are being held with an event at the Royal Yacht on the 17th of September. And of the 10 categories of Director of the Year Awards, one of those is the charitable sector. And again, it's really wonderful when we've had so many nominations which have been coming in for that sector to really recognise the hard work in this area that's being done.
Thanks. I mean, Mark, as an organisation owned by its customers and owned by the community, it would be helpful to get your take on the first question, the benefits for charities, but perhaps also you could touch on the benefits for the companies themselves, as Lisa has.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a cooperative point of view, Kevin, it's part of our DNA. So Principle 7 of the cooperative principles is that we have got a concern for the community. So that is about us developing sustainable communities, and that's about giving back. And Tom's highlighted a good point, not just about the money. So whilst that's useful and it helps charities, there is an absolute opportunity to share skills and experience between both the corporate and the charity. And they'll both come at different issues in different ways, but we like to learn from others, and sharing our skills and experience with the different teams and the different roles we have with charities is a real benefit, and being able to impart some of that knowledge by sitting on boards or sitting on committees with charities is really positive. But equally, from our point of view, our colleagues get a lot of satisfaction and a lot of learning from developing that work with the charitable sector, that helps us understand some of the issues that the charity sector are trying to deal with and some of the social issues that are out there. So there's positives on both fronts, without a doubt.
Do you think your managers learn to do their jobs better, to be better managers by sort of being involved in these partnerships then, Mark? Does that make a difference?
I think it gives them a much better understanding of what's important to the community, but equally they're learning different skill sets that perhaps are difficult to learn and develop within the sort of organisation. So they'll come across different issues by working with charities that perhaps they won't see in the day-to-day work. So it is definitely helping develop them as individuals, which is positive.
Alan, your day job is in the private sector. What's your views about this? The benefits to the private sector of supporting charities and working in partnership with charities?
Yeah, I think what it does do is it gives a lot of job satisfaction, and I think as time goes on, you've got corporates that are working with charities. I think that will be an important factor when people are assessing the next role that they want to maybe go to. From a Jersey Finance perspective, when I put out the idea that we might look to do a 3-year strategic partnership with the Grace Crocker Foundation, I was overwhelmed about how many people that came forward. So I think part of it is there's a leadership piece from the top of organisations to create the opportunity for their members of staff to get involved, and it's extremely rewarding. Even this week, we've got a CRS activity on, and so I think as time goes on, and particularly with the sustainable finance agenda that is really getting harnessed in Jersey, you're starting to see people look through that impact lens, that sort of profit with purpose. And so if we were having this conversation maybe 5 or 10 years ago, I don't think it would be as powerful as it is today. And there's been a number of charities that have been seeking urgent funding, and because of the nature of my role and know lots of people and people that are managing foundations, you manage to connect them. And so I think the Finance Centre, both from a human capital perspective and the willingness for the companies wanting to drive that agenda, is a perfect opportunity for Jersey.
Before I come to Tom, if I might say that, I see quite often that people are looking to gain experience on boards as they sort of advance their careers, and often serving on a charity board brings as many challenges and experiences as it would in a company. In fact, often more of them, because it is just so challenging at times for these charities. So I really do think, I genuinely think that that it's a two-way street, and both sides get benefits equal. So it's not just the private sector giving to the charity, and it's not just feel good for the private sector, as we've discussed. Tom, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the point of what we're discussing today is partnerships, and therefore, a partnership does have to work for both parties, and it is about understanding what both parties want out of that relationship, and what they're looking to gain. I do think that, I mean, from our perspective, I mean, certainly, there's things that we're always looking for, which is access to people. We're wanting to, often with a charity's work, you're wanting people to understand the importance of what it is that you're doing. And actually, if you've got a large company which has a large workforce and they're behind it, they can grow an audience. I mean, particularly from an arts point of view, if every member of the company bought a ticket and came along, that can be hugely valuable. But actually, in terms of getting behind the, what the purpose of the charity is and understanding about what it's trying to achieve, often, exactly as Mark says, people can tell you sometimes how you can achieve that better than you can yourself. They can give you that outside perspective. They can give you insights in terms of what's happening in the world and in the market. So they can give you, tips as to what people are thinking, what is important from the working, from Jersey's general public, and that can then translate in terms of reach and indeed in terms of fundraising as well. So I think, as I said, this notion, as long as both parties are clear with each other about what they're looking to gain and what they can bring, then you're on a route to success.
Thanks, Tom. Lisa, do you have anything to add to the thing? No.
Thanks, Kevin. I think there's 4 areas that sort of are focused on in terms of when these partnerships are being considered. And I think firstly, it works best where there's a mutual benefit for the company and the voluntary organisation, and obviously the volunteers themselves. So, costs can be significant, whether direct or indirect. So it works best when all the stakeholders are sort of fully aware of those benefits. I think secondly, and linked inextricably to the first consideration, is the cultural element. I think in terms of both organisations will probably have quite different cultures and challenges and expectations. So understanding these from the outset is crucial to a successful partnership. And I think that's why the Grace Crocker partnership with Jersey Finance has worked particularly well, because Alan, when he explained what was required from his side, it was a really good platform upon which to sort of see, is that going to work and how is it going to work with Jersey Finance. I think in terms of, thirdly, it can be beneficial to work with the third-party brokers or intermediaries to help find the right organisation to provide support to and ultimately to partner with. I think it's not a case of just perhaps partnering with the first one that comes along because you want to try and assist. It's got to be that right fit. And I think finally, scale is also important, because there's often a preference with working with smaller voluntary organisations where the impact can be felt and seen a lot more keenly than with a larger organisation where people really sort of query, are they making that much difference or not? So yeah, those are just some thoughts, Kevin, in terms of how to get that right fit and that right partnership. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Let's talk about the key ingredients that make that successful partnership between the charity and the private sector. And we've just talked about the partnership between Jersey Finance and Grace Crocker. So Alan, maybe you could talk about the history of that and how that came about. That would be helpful to everybody.
Absolutely, Kevin. So it'd probably be remiss of me not to just very quickly talk about the aims of the Grace Crocker Foundation, which will take a couple of seconds, but and then frame how the charity's evolved. So the 2 key aims for the Grace Crocker Foundation is to support families financially and emotionally, sick children that need to go off island for medical treatment. And on the financial side of things, that's paying for flights, accommodation, food, travel costs, but most importantly, to make sure that families are together when they're going through this very difficult period. And Nigel and Sarah Crocker, the founders of the charity, have done an amazing job over the last decade with a small committee. When you're the founder of a charity, you're surrounded with people that want to help and support. And a lot of them are from a fundraising perspective. So all the day-to-day running of the charity happens behind the scenes, and you've got your own children, you've got your jobs. And as the charity grows, you realize actually it needs to be more professionalized. And so this small charity has now raised 1.1 million and helps generally 50 families each year. And so I think where we've ended up is, given the radical changes of standards from the charities sector, and particularly the new charities law, and public's demand for transparency and governance means that charities need assistance behind the scenes more than ever. And so over the COVID period, and since we had this partnership put together, we've decided to set up a new legal entity. We've got a new board of directors, a new management team, new governance structure, to try and future-proof the charity for the next decade. And I suppose the key elements of the partnership between Jersey Finance and the Grace Crocker Foundation, which we signed in 2019, was a strategic partnership really built on skills, knowledge, and expertise. So, you know, I took up the chairman role, but I quickly realized I don't have all the skills to try and help lead the charity forward. And so it's more of a human capital a partnership. And actually, I don't know if people picked up back in 2019, the Jersey Community Partnership set up Twinning for Impact, Take the Pledge campaign. And that's what we actually did in that time. And obviously we've had COVID, which has been quite challenging. But the charity is in a much better position going forward. And that does play out into fundraising opportunities because we had an event in February, the 164 Mile Challenge, which raised just short of £100,000. And it was a blend of new people coming in, and it wasn't all down to Jersey Finance, but there was a key element of that. And so I suppose when I look back about this partnership and you know, in preparation for this, I was thinking there's 4 key sort of elements. One is trust. I think you've both got to go into this and you've got to have an element of trust and being on the same page. I think open and clear communication on what the objectives are and what you're trying to achieve. And I think you have to have a long enough partnership for a meaningful output. So 3 years sounds like a long time, but it goes pretty quickly. And I think at the end of the 3 years, it'll probably be time for some new people to come on board and try and take the charity in a different direction. And then also, I think that one I didn't quite realize at the outset, but is probably critical, is to leverage the success of partnerships outside of this one as well. And what do I mean by that? I think we've brought people in that we realized we're not going to be able to get them skills. So one was on the COSEC side. So we brought somebody in from Zedra on the COSEC side, and then somebody put themselves forward on the digital side, which has been really important for us. So we've got a blend of a Jersey Finance partnership, but other people coming to complement it. So that, you know, when that partnership ends, not everybody is around the table that are Jersey Finance, if that makes sense. And I think that's quite important to consider.
And Alan, you know, I guess one of the questions that most of the charities would ask is, what's the best way for them to open these partnerships, to initiate these partnerships? What is the best way from the charity's point of view to set up a date? There's no Tinder for for charities and business.
No, I know. I think you've got lots of people that we share values of trying to make sure our community thrives, and because we are a small community and we want to do good. But you're right, that if there was a Tinder, it would make life a lot easier. I do think that the Twinning for Impact, Taking a Pledge campaign that was put out there just before COVID still stands true today. And Rachel French brought that to life, I think with Aidan McAvenue. I exchanged an email with her and said, are you interested in people reaching out to you? And likewise with you, Kevin, and, you know, even from a Jersey Finance perspective and Lisa from an IOD perspective, I think maybe bringing that pledge to life would create the opportunity for people to come forward and say, actually, we're interested in A, B, and C. How can we connect with others? So I think there's a fair bit of work that we can do on the back of this webinar.
And the other major opportunity we've got this year is that, you know, AJC are working with Jersey Finance to sort of celebrate the 60th anniversary of the start of the finance industry, and that happens to be our 50th anniversary as well. So, you know, I think that partnership, we're a charity ourselves, obviously, in that partnership we hope to build on and get the message that there are win-wins for both sides.
Yep.
Lisa, can I come to you about successful ingredients?
Yeah, I think it was, you know, what we were saying before, Kevin, in terms of those 4 areas of focus, which I sort of had in mind in terms of when you're looking in terms of who to partner with. But what I would like to perhaps pick up on, Kevin, is one of your earlier points, which I thought was really well made, in that one thing we do hear from a IOD membership perspective is also not only the sort of the fact that it gives great benefits to both the charity and the organisation as well, but for those individuals who are wanting either to become a non-executive director or to go on boards, these provide really, valuable examples and experience of where they can gain some great insight in terms of board dynamics and how the whole mechanism works. I mean, I agree with what Alan's just been saying, that the relationship needs to be for a certain period of time, because 3 years does indeed go very fast indeed in terms of 10 years, because I think by the time you've got into the role, you've sort of got your own vision and impact which you wish to make, and then you affect those changes, and then you're obviously on to the next, and it's important that you have continuity as well. But I do think that the more that we can encourage these partnerships, and I really agree with Alan in terms of what the ask is of today, in terms of and what we can focus on going forward between the stakeholders here by sort of collaborating and joining up the dots as much as possible. But I do think that it is really as well a good opportunity for people to gain some really valuable experience in these particular roles as well with some of the charities.
Thanks. Tom, key ingredients. Clearly, you've been through a number of partnerships and carry on with that. Can you give other charities and businesses some tips about those ingredients to add to what Alan and Lisa have said?
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of the time it's about both parties caring about the target group. So, I mean, one of our longest standing partnerships is with Skipton International. I mean, we've done a lot of work with them. And the point that why that both works is that we both care deeply about serving the public. Now, Skipton is their business is all around serving people with day-to-day banking needs, people's mortgages, people's homes, people's savings. They are absolutely committed to doing the best job that they possibly can. And through us, not only are they serving the artistic community in terms of providing an opportunity there, but the work that we do together is all about serving the public. So we've got the Skipton Big Ideas this year that is happening in the town church. Will be the biggest installation exhibition that I've certainly ever known here in the island. And it's providing free access to everybody to high quality art, but it's also working with other charities to push different causes. So it'll be working with Enable Jersey and others in terms of the installations that are made by people who have perhaps a particular perspective on life, and you're giving the public that access. And the reason I think is, again, reflecting on what Adam and Lisa both said about clear communication, about trust, and about having a common purpose, but it is mainly down to the fact that we both want to serve the public, and we recognise that we both have a role to play in that. In other instances, we have had much sort of more targeted partnerships with private client organisations, with finance organisations that are looking more to a select group. And actually within the arts, we're able to provide unique experiences for people who then also care about the work that you're doing for targeted groups. But we're able to work with that partner to think, okay, how can we use the arts to particularly give those clients something that they wouldn't get otherwise? How can we give them an experience that will really resonate and make a difference to their lives, and then make them think about how they might be able to support to provide that experience to others. So again, from that partner, one of the private banks, perhaps, they really care about that target group and making sure that they have they have a unique offer and offering them something special. So I think all of us, with any partnership, I think, we're all humans trying to do the best for our businesses and for our target groups. And I think if you start from that basis as to who you're trying to serve and why, and then being honest about what you can bring and what you can't bring, I think there is definitely danger sometimes. I know from a charity point of view, we've got a lot of work to do. We have money that we need to raise, and sometimes you're desperate to find a fit. And you've got to be honest when there isn't. We're not actually going to meet your purposes. It doesn't sound to me like there is something here. However, we've done this in the past where we've recommended other charities. we have said, I remember in a situation where they were looking for mass audience, and at the time, the organisation I was running wouldn't be able to do that, but we recommended Broncash as a big festival. And I think that, there's this misconception that charities are in competition with each other, but really not. Again, we all serve the public. And I think that there's an opportunity for the charitable sector to work more closely together. We're in line with the corporates to actually be able to achieve these common aims. We all bring something. We all bring something of value.
Thanks, Tom. We're gonna. I'm got an eye on the clock here. So I want to come to. I think you've trust, clarity of communication, patience, and obviously an alignment are key. Alignment of objectives are key. Mark, can I come to you about the pitfalls of partnerships? Clearly, the co-op sort of are involved with a lot of community projects and have helped countless charities over the years. So, what can go wrong?
Well, I think avoiding all the positive, avoiding making mistakes and driving the positive we've talked about. So, it's the reverse of all the stuff we've been talking about so far. I think, recognizing that corporates and charities are looking to get something out of the partnership, and any good partnership is an investment in time. So, making sure that that time is invested up front to understand what's being sought from each party, and is it a good cultural fit? So the right fit for both the charity and the organisation involved, and communication being clear, getting the right stakeholders in the room up front, and being able to commit to what both parties are looking for. And as Tom highlighted there, being clear and honest from the start as to what that partnership is looking to get out of managing those expectations ultimately. That will make the partnership much easier in the long run if there is a shared expectation. But I think it's about avoiding overcommitting, and I think sometimes charities and corporates can commit and get carried away in terms of what they think can be achieved, but both organizations are going to have finite resource in which they can apply. So a charity looking at a large organization and thinking this is what I want from it, and it could be I need to develop some technology, I want some marketing support, that may not suit the corporate at that particular time. So having those honest upfront conversations around what they're looking to get out of it will be really important. I think treating each other equally as well, in terms of what is expected and what each of the partners want to get out of it, so that both parties can be heard around the expectations that they're looking for. But I think the key one is bringing strengths to the table from both parties. So if it is seen as mutually beneficial, then that will lead to success. If somebody feels that that they're having to overcommit or they're not seeing a benefit out of the partnership, then that will lead to it falling down, I guess. But reviewing that partnership on a regular basis and understanding what benefits coming for the corporate and the charity, and having those discussions and being upfront about what's required will hopefully help. So lots and lots of positives. It's just those pitfalls around being prepared to commit, putting the time up front to understand what's required, I guess.
Okay, thanks, Mark. We've only got 7 more minutes, so I want to try and finish this on time. And I've got one last question for everybody, but I just perhaps Lisa, you could come in on pitfalls.
Sorry, Kevin, with the
on the pitfalls of establishing a partnership with a charity. What do you see as the downsides of it? What can go wrong?
I suppose one of the challenges when you look at sort of in terms of an organisation where you've got obviously lots of paid employees, I suppose that the challenges of a partnership is when we're looking at those, it's obviously voluntary in terms of the relationship, and I suppose that in those cases, and unlike a paid situation where you can have perhaps more of a sort of conversation along the lines of why, somebody's not perhaps dedicating as much time as they could do, or perhaps, there's some concerns in terms of the way they're doing things. It's more of a challenge in this situation. And it's, if you look at it's like our IOD team, we're all volunteers, and therefore you're very, you're very reliant on people's goodwill. So I suppose the key to it in this situation, I think this is why the Grace Crock and the Jersey Finance is really such a, an excellent example, is you've got the same objectives which have been clearly laid out from the beginning in terms of going to Mark's point about expectations and Tom's point about trust. So I think that's it's a good, strong foundation. But, you just really need to engender that team spirit within the volunteers. I suppose, so I think really the pitfall, Kevin, is, as I say, it's a challenge when perhaps, people don't perhaps fulfill their roles in terms of how you deal with that when they are only voluntary members as opposed to paid employees. So, but I think, as we've seen both with the Grace Crocker and like with the IOD membership, you've just got to engender that good team spirit and that positivity. And, it's hugely rewarding for those involved on a number of fronts. So, I'd like to pick up on Tom's earlier points. I really do. I think it's, it's great to get everybody engaged on things like this. And I think, particularly following the pandemic, I think it's reset everybody quite a bit, the pandemic has. And I think it's really made everybody even more community focused and wishing to work together, which is a positive, I think, Kevin, after the last few months.
Kevin, can I just add to the pitfalls very quickly?
Of course you can, Alan.
Yeah.
4 more minutes.
Okay, I'll keep it to 30 seconds. I think one of the things that people don't appreciate is if you're taking a charity that has been run out the kitchen or the living room and you say you want to help and support the environment that financial services work in through a governance lens is a bit of a culture shock. And so all of a sudden you've got to try and take people on this journey. And then you realize actually, if you have a legal entity that's now the holding company for the charity, you've got all the JFSC stuff that you've got to do, and keeping people to understand why you're doing it, and why you're bringing in somebody that might hold your feet to the fire on a governance piece. I think there's an art in that, and sometimes you don't get it right the first time. Over a period of time, people come on that journey, but I think it's probably something, if people are going into this twinning type activity, you've got to have patience through that process.
Okay, so I want to wrap up. I just want to go round the panel. Thank you, everyone. I just want to go around the one and just ask for one thing that our expert panel will advise charities for creating new partnerships. The one most important thing. And as I say, we've only got a few more minutes. So we'll start with you, Alan.
I would say consider the Twinning Pledge, because I think it guides you quite nicely. And when you're looking at charities, don't always look through the fundraising lens, because there's all the stuff that goes on in the background that takes up hours and hours of time. That's where financial services can, even by embracing that, you will help the charity with fundraising. It's bizarre. It's like a reversed effect, but get the back end right and you'll free people up to do the fundraising.
Mark, what would be your bit of business advice?
I think it's that piece around investing the time up front. So I think choose the partners that are the right fit for your organisation. So share your common principles and your charity's culture. So it'll make it easier for both parties to identify around the mission, the overall purpose that's trying to be generated.
Thanks, Mark. Tom?
I think to go in ready to listen, and any conversation needs to be two-way, and to be clear about what you can give, not just about what you need, because then you're, as a charitable partner, you're going to be in a stronger position anyway. It's not always about going cup in hand, but what the value is that you're bringing to the relationship.
Thanks, Tom. And almost exactly the last word for you, Lisa.
Challenge you getting lost, Kevin, is all good comments. Always gone first, haven't they? Always the positive ones. I think actually it's just to make sure the foundations are right. So have those candid, honest conversations right at the outset to make sure that the objectives are aligned and expectations are as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. I know the AJC, as I said it before, it's our 50th year, and we're going to be working hard, particularly with Jersey Finance, to create more partnerships and more opportunities for charities and the private sector to build back better. So finally, I just wanted to thank everybody who's joined this webinar today. As I say, I think it's being recorded, so we hopefully will go viral on YouTube at some point for all the right reasons, because it's a very important matter. Thank you, everyone.